Uh, okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to tell you about The Monster by Jeffrey Chaucer. This is one of the Canterbury Tales. It's written in the late 14th century. In this, the narrator, who is a monk, sets the stage for the tales he is about to tell by explaining the theme, purpose on his histories. In this, the host is joking with the monk. The host also complains about his old wife, saying she's quick to anger and fight when he's trying to manage his starving employees. The monk responds by agreeing to tell a history either about Edward, Edward the Confessor or some tragedies. He knows, he says that the jokes and offer to tell a history if the group is interested. Basically, this is a conversation, right? The host teases the monk for being a monk and suggests he should have a wife and a family. And also, the monk plays along in offer to tell a history. And then start to to start to selling the characters that he will describe. For example, in the first one that tells in the history, it said that a monk tell, and the monk states that he will narrate his tales as in a tragic manner, which means that he will focus on the histories of people of high social status who suffer great misfortunes and ultimately fell from their position. And that's why here we had the histories always end with a tragedy, right? And with the monk tales. And the first character that the monk star is Lucifer. Lucifer, um, who was an angel and not a human. Unlike humans, angels are not supposed to be influenced by luck or chance, right? However, Lucifer's story is different because he made a big mistake and it wasn't because of love, like as the monk said. Lucifer used to be the brightest and most glorious angel, but he became proud and rebellion against God. As a punishment for the behavior, he was thrown into hell, where he became known as Satan, the ultimate symbol of evil, like the monk said. This reminds us that how tragic Lucifer fall from grace was and how he ended suffering in hell forever. And the second character is Adam, the first human created by God. This history is about, yes, Adam. He lived in a beautiful place called the Garden of Eden and had control over everything there, except for one tree that God told him not to eat from. Adam was the most important person on earth at that time, and he had a perfect life in that beautiful garden, right? But things went wrong when he didn't listen to God and ate from the forbidden tree. As a result, God kicking him out of the garden, and life became much harder for Adam. He had to work, suffer, for example, and face some difficulties, including the fact that he would actually die someday. In simple terms, this history tells us how about Adam, the first human, lost his perfect life in a paradise because he didn't obey the God demand. And he did remarkable things, but he didn't listen what God said to him. And the other character is Samson. It was a man with incredible strength. This story, mm, tell us that he was chosen by God before he was even born incredibly strong, right? He did remarkable things like defeating a legion with her bare hands, like the monk said. But Samson had a weakness, his hair, and that was his secret. But someday he fell in love with a woman named Delilah, and who tricked him into reveal his secret. She told his enemies, who captured and blinding him. In the end, Samson used his remaining strength to bring down a building, killing both himself and his enemies. The lesson here for the monk is not to share important secrets, especially with people who might use them against you. So Samson trusts in the wrong person, and that was so difficult in his life. And the next one is Hercules, a famous hero with incredible strength. Um, this Hercules, it was a hero. He was incredibly strong and did many heroic things like defeating monsters and accomplished great feats. However, the story takes a sad turn when Hercules falls in love with a woman named Denaira. She tries to make him a special chair, but it ends up being positioned without her knowing. And when Hercules wears the positional chair, it makes him very sick and he suffers a lot. He eventually decides to end his offline because he can't bear the pain. The story also reminds us that life can be unpredictable and sometimes bad things can happen when we least expect it. It's important to be careful and aware of life uncertainties, and even for the bravest and strongest people. And the last person, the last character that I had is Nabucodonosor. Nabucodonosor. This tells the story of a very powerful king named Nabucodonosor. He had lots of special things like a fancy throne, valuable treasures, and a big gold statue. He even took treasures from a temple in Jerusalem when he conquered it. But he did some really bad things too. He made young people from Israel into slaves. He wanted everyone to worship his gold statue. Anyone who didn't was thrown into a fire. One wise person called Daniel and his two friends refused to worship the statue. Because of this, God made Nabucodonosor go crazy. With long hair and nails like a bird's tail, eventually God showed him mercy and he began saying again. He realized that God was really powerful and kind. He promised to be a better person for the rest of his life, and thank God. The history teaches us that no matter how powerful you are, you should be humble and recognized for the rest of his life and thank God. And the other characters is going to be explained by my classmates.
Hello everyone, my name is Elvin Rafael Solís Argueta and I will continue talking about the tale features as a serious tragic story of a historical figure who were in a high position of powers and wealth, but eventually fell out of a favor and met tragic ends. In this tale you can find the story of Belshazzar. Belshazzar is representing a tragic figure who defied God's will and suffered the consequences. The monk relates the story of the feast of Belshazzar, where he desecrated the sacred vessels of the Jewish temple and was punished by the mysterious hand, and he wrote on the wall predicting the fall of Kingdom. Belshazzar's pride and arrogance led to his downfall, and his story served as a warning of against of dangers of arrogance. Zenobia. Zenobia is represented as a novel of beautiful and brave queen who challenged the power of the empire. The monk described her as a skilled warrior and a symbol of resistance against the imperial powers. However, her rebellion was eventually crushed by the Romans, and she was captured and taken to the Romans as a prisoner. Zenobia's history serves as a reminder of consequences of challenging authority and dangers of overreaching. King Peter of Spain. King Peter of Spain, the specific refer King Peter who faced the envy and betrayal of his own subject as related by the monk in this tale. How bitterly we must mourn your sorrow, who for your brother pushed to fly after a sledge couch by the treachery, and thus betrayed were led to his tent where he with his own hands he murdered you and gained succession to your throne and rent. The monk described how King Peter's success empowered resistment among his lieutenants who eventually turned against him. The story of King Peter served as a warning against danger of religion on one's own power and the fickleness of loyalty. King Peter of Cyprus, who presenting himself as a conqueror who faced the envy and treachery of his own subjects as related by the monk in this tale. O Peter, King of Cyprus, fine and true, who conquered Alexandria by the right of arms, and made war also the pants your very lieutenant and bind you, in the rush against your chivalry move, then to murder you next days in your bed. The monk describes how King Peter's military campaigns and conquests left resentment among his own people, who eventually murdered him. This is a reminder of dangers of ambitions and the consequences of overreaching. Bernardo Visconti of Lombardy. He is presented as a tyrannical ruler who oppressed his subjects and faced rebellion, as related by the monk in this tale. Great Bernardo Visconti, god of indulgence, scourge of Lombardy. The monk described how Bernardo's oppressive policies and harsh treatment of the nobility and common people led to discontent and rebellion. History serves a warning against the dangers of tyranny and the consequences of abusing of one's power. Count Ugolino of Pisa is presenting him as a tragic figure who was imprisoned and left to starve along with his children as related by the monk in this tale. Oh fortune, it was great cruelty to put such bears in such a cage alive. The monk described how Count Ugolinos involved in the conflict with Bishop had formulated lies against him, and the people of the city had recited out believed everything the bishop could devise upon his imprisoned and eventually demise. And that's all for me, and my classmate will continue.
Did nothing but satisfy his own loots and even open wide his own mother to see the womb from which he came. He had Seneca assassinated for asserting that emperor should be virtuous when it seems that Nero will be killed for his cruelty. He committed suicide. He loved jewels, right? He was always wearing covered by sapphires and white pearls, right? Or another any other type of jewels, right? He was vain. He was vain and demanding. He set on fire Rome because of he, their for their announcements. What and also he killed his his senators, right? Just to see them cry. He ordered to kill his own brother. He slept with his sister, and as I said, he opened his mom just to see the womb in the place in which he was conceived. At the end, his own people wanted to kill him. Right when he knew that, he committed suicide. He killed himself. Holofernes ordered his subject to renounce all the laws and worship Nabucodonosor. For this sin, Judy cut off Holofernes' head while he slept. Right. Not only did men fear him for fear of losing their freedom and the wealth and everything they had, but also he forced them to renounce to their faith. Nabucodonosor is God he established, right? And he declared that in another God is to be worshipped, right? That's why Judith cut off his head when he was sleeping. He entered to the camp and cut off his head, and that was the end of Holofernes. King Antiochus, who was punished by God for attacking the Jews, God made Antiochus infested with loathsome worms. He was so arrogant, right? He thought that he could reach the stars and hold back the tides of the sea, right? He hated God's people. He hated God's people. He ordered to kill lots of Jews, right? As a result of this, God punished him with a disease, a terrible disease, in which many worms came out of his body, right? And he had a tremendous stench that no one wanted to be next to him. No one wanted to help him, right? And one day he was on his chariot, right? And suddenly he fell down and hurt himself. As a result of it, he died, and that was the end of this famous king, Antiochus. Alexander the Great, poisoned by his own offspring, right? He conquered the whole world by forces, except when his opponents or enemies asked for peace, right? Thanks to his formidable reputation, whenever he went, he humbled the pride of men, right? No comparison can be made between Alexander the Great and other conquerors, right? The whole world trembled in terror before him. He was poisoned by his own people, right? At the end, he died. He was poisoned by his own people, right? That was the end of him. Julius Caesar, who had Pompey assassinated, but was himself assassinated by Brutus. Um, the conqueror Julius, right, rose from his humble to become a king, right, conquering the whole West by land, by sea, by diplomacy, by force, by arms, whenever the way you can imagine, right? But always he conquered. Um, then he returned to Rome, right? Triumphant and crowned, right? But in time, Brutus Cassius, right, who was always who was always envied Julius Caesar, right, created plans, right, to kill him. So he and some other enemies of Julius, right, kill him. They hurt him with daggers, right, and as a result of it, he died. Crassus, king of Lydia, the proud and rich king who was hanged, right? He was king of Lydia, right? Whom Cyrus himself revered with admiration. But in the middle of his old pride, he was taken prisoner, right, and led into the fire to be burned to death, right? Obviously. However, there fell from the heavens such a flow that the fire was extinguished, right? And he could escape from it. He was running, right, but one night he had a dream. He had a dream, and he asked his daughter to tell him what the dream mean meant, right? And at the end, his daughter told him that he was about to be hanged, right? And that was the end of this famous king. So the moral of all strategies is the same: that fortune always attacks overbearing kingdoms when they least expect it. For when men trust in her, right? Suddenly she vanishes and hides her shining face behind a cloud. All high-status people fall into misery and death. That's the moral of the all details we have explained in this video.